2 days after the towers actually fell, I was given a furlough notice and basically said, hey, Steve, you know that safe and that secure job you thought you had? It was never safe and it was never secure. And now you're going to be on the street with 50,000 other pilots. So good luck. I started reading books on what people do that are wealthy. And I started to realize that the people that were wealthy were somehow, some way tied to real estate. Again, my mindset, I'm going down that path. And that's when we grew in 7 years to over 1,000 properties. 60% of our company was outsourced to Mexico with virtual assistants because we are so good at right person, right seat. Just like a fueler on an airplane knows how to fuel.
Hey friends, welcome back to the Evergreen Marketing Show by Carrot.com, where we help you dial in your evergreen marketing so you can build a business of freedom and impact. I'm talking to a guy today, a new friend, new acquaintance, who's done exactly that. He's built a business of freedom and impact with a real purpose behind it. I'm very interested in his story. He's got a crazy wild background, and I'm just very intrigued. And I had to bring him on the podcast to share him with y'all. So his name's Steve. He's a commercial airline pilot with a very extensive real estate background. And I'm just fascinated, and I want to hear what the systems and the process he's learned as a pilot and how he's applied it to real estate to do what most people would take decades to do. He's done in a much shorter time frame. So Steve, welcome to our podcast.
Hey man, thanks for having me. And I appreciate the opportunity to kind of help some other people and share some knowledge.
Absolutely, man. Well, thanks for taking the time to hop on. You know, at first I saw your email came through. You are a coach of one of our friends, one of our members we had on the podcast recently, Chris Ty.
Yep.
He said, hey, how about this guy, Steve? And at first I looked, I was like, I don't know if it really fits in the scope of the podcast. I was like, I'm not sure. And I was like, but so there's something really interesting here. And I watched your podcast with Brad Lee. I was like, okay, this is a good podcast. And as soon as we hopped on the phone, I was like, oh, dang, this guy's done a lot of deals. Like he's got some experience. Like I couldn't tell at first from online, but you've done a lot of deals. You know your stuff. You're actually walking the talk. So,
I've got some miles underneath me, we'll say.
Yeah. Let's get into it, man. Let's go through your story, because your story is really interesting. Take me to the beginning, but I want to hear how you became one of the fastest growing management companies in the state of Texas, because that's not something a lot of people can claim.
And it's not something that you ever think you're going to do. I'll tell you that right now. So, I started off as a little kid and, I wanted to do one thing in life, and that was be an airline pilot. I wanted to fly planes. Born and raised Southern California, 5 siblings, parents are blue collar workers. And I was always told by my parents that, if you want something, you got to go get it. Like nobody is going to give you anything. Yeah. And so I used that mindset and methodology and I busted my butt. And at 25 years old, I became the second youngest person hired by this particular airline.
Wow.
So I'm 25 years old. I've got the job of a lifetime. I'm flying all over the globe and it is just amazing. I'm living on an island called Guam and I'm flying all over South Pacific, Asia, Australia. I mean, imagine you're 25 years old and I'm just this is awesome. And everyone's telling me, man, you're set for life. Nothing can go wrong. Famous last words, right? Certain day in history, and that day was 9/11. And as we know, 9/11, tragic day for many millions and millions of people, altered their lives, ended some lives, and my life was changed as a result of it as well. And the reason is 2 days after the towers actually fell, I was given a furlough notice and basically said, hey, Steve, you know that safe and that secure job you thought you had? It was never safe and it was never secure. And now you're going to be on the street with 50,000 other pilots. So good luck. So obviously 9/11 just hit. Now I'm sitting there going, okay, I didn't do anything, but now I am involved in this situation. And worse, because I focused on doing one thing, that one thing didn't exist. And now I had to go home and tell my wife, I don't know what to do because I don't have another skill set. Like this
is my only life skill. Yeah.
That's the only thing because I listened to my parents of focus, work hard, one thing, go after it. So I really had a hard time. And listen, talk about a punch to the face, kick to the gut
Mm.
kind of thing. That's that moment. It's very humbling, and it's very deflating in life, because now you're like, wow, was this all a lie? Like, is this whole career thing not what it thought it was?
Yeah.
And so I did what I thought I should do. I went to this building. It has books in it. They call it a library. Nowadays, most people would go to YouTube, but that didn't exist in 2001. And I started reading books on what people do that are wealthy. And I read a book a week. Every week, I checked out a book. And I
Mm.
started to realize that the people that were wealthy were somehow, some way tied to real estate. I knew nothing about real estate, but I'm like, okay, this seems to make sense. Again, my mindset, I'm going down that path. So I started
Mhm.
reading, learning. I got a mentor. I learned how to do creative real estate. I was flipping, double escrow closes, you name it, I was doing it. And of course, as you can imagine, I'm sure many of your viewers, I got lied to, I got ripped off, I got stolen from, I got cheated. I mean, you name it, it happened to me.
There's too many gurus.
Oh yeah, exactly. The real estate professional is much different than the airline professional. So
Yeah.
different code of ethics, we'll say. We'll leave
Yeah.
it at that.
Yeah.
And
That's good.
so
That's a good.
yeah, so now I realize, okay, it's a different set of rules. I'm cool with that. I've got to change. I've got to pivot, which I did,
Mhm.
and I started learning, and I started watching and learning, and I stopped just a few more times of getting ripped off, a few more times less getting stolen from, and I started figuring it out. Started getting better. I started really, really doing good at wholesaling properties at the time, single family properties.
You
I
doing
mean,
this by yourself at the time or
I
with
was
a
doing it by
couple buddies?
myself. Yeah, I
Okay.
was doing it, and I was using kind of my mindset of a pilot. And I'll go into that in a
Mhm.
minute here. But I
Yeah.
kind of, as a pilot, we're trained processes, procedures that, so I'm kind of looking at this going, okay, how do we procedurize this? How do we process that? And my mind is kind of going that way that, look, it's not a business. Wholesaling's not a business. It's a job, but it was a pretty good paying job for me because I focused on learning how to negotiate. And that was the one thing I'm like, I'm going to be the best negotiator I can be. I took
Mm.
classes, I read books. I made enough money negotiating that I started buying apartment complexes with all the money I made. Just put it that way.
Yeah.
And bought an apartment complex with another business partner in Houston, Texas. And we decided that, hey, we should go buy some single family houses. Steve, you know how to negotiate. Let's get these houses and let's keep them. Well, as you know, and many people know, that real estate has a funny way of teaching you a lesson, even though you think you're the smartest person in the room. When you make a mistake and you buy bad properties, it will come like a wrecking ball and it will clean your clock. After we
Yeah.
had about 40 wrong houses, that wrecking ball came through our front door when we
Mm.
realized we had a problem. So these were low income properties, and low income properties are very hands on properties. We
Okay.
were trying to run them more passively, the way we would run the apartment complex or the way we
Mm.
would run upper end properties.
Just bad expectations.
Bad expectations. We had the wrong business model in there. It's like we were trying to
Mm.
snow ski in the summer. Right
Yeah.
idea, wrong time of year. This was the wrong
Yeah.
area, wrong price point. So
Yeah.
because
Okay.
nobody would manage them, we had to manage them ourselves. So we
Yeah.
went to a business coach after we stabilized them and we said, look, we've got people approaching us. They're asking us to manage their houses. We really don't want to, but maybe there's a business here. Maybe there's something here. So he says, well, let me take a look at it. He goes, come back in a couple of days. So we go back a couple of days later and he goes, well, the good news is you definitely have opportunity. There is an ability to scale and there's a market. The bad news is you two are not the smartest guys on the planet and you'll be bankrupt in 6 months because you don't
Mm.
know how to run a business. So we're like, I'm not sure if he's complimenting me or if he's insulting us.
Yeah.
Oh, we hire him on the spot. We now have a business coach and have no idea what we're doing.
How old are you at this point? What time frame?
This is about 2000 and well, it's 2012. 2012.
2012. Okay, so 12
Yeah.
years ago. Okay.
So June 1st, 2012, we hired our business coach. December 1st, we do what we say, we burned our boats. My business partner quit his job full time and he went
Mhm.
all in on the managing of the assets. We stayed with this guy for 7 years. We started growing. We started growing. We started growing very fast because why? I'm good at negotiating, but we didn't have the back end systems and operation to sustain the
Mhm.
growth. So
Yeah.
as we get to this point of chaos, we're basically growing ourselves into bankruptcy. I sit there and I'm sitting there one day and I can relate it to you if you want, but I'm at the airport and I'm watching this plane coming in and I'm like watching everything that's going on with this plane, which in the airline industry, it's a very specific activity that happens. And as I'm watching this, I'm like, wait a second, this is just a system. And then I start looking about how they board passengers. I'm looking about how they take your bags. And I'm looking around, I'm like, wait a second. I've been trained for 25 years how to build a system in the airline. Why can't this work in my company? So I come back to my business partner and I'm like, dude, we got it. He's like, what? I'm like, I think I can figure this out. I'm like, we're going to put an airline in
Yeah.
our company. And he looked at me like, you've got to be the stupidest person on earth. I'm like, trust me, man, this is going to work.
Yeah.
So we took our biggest dumpster fire, which was when we get a new client to hand them over for operations to fulfill the property, do the make ready, get it rented. That gap was like the Grand Canyon. We just could not figure out how to get it right. So we created a checklist and we said, okay, who's responsible for this? Who's not responsible? We floated out. And then we started to realize who was responsible for what was working, what was not working, and where our weaknesses were. And we're like, next thing you know, the fire goes away. Interesting. Then we started putting what's called key performance indicators, KPIs, which are basically temperature probes of metrics of each thing. Sales closed 10 properties. How many did operations get? Something as simple as that. Before it'd be like sales closed 10, operations got 2. Nobody would ever ask, where are the other 8? So now we started having checklists. And next thing you know, it started to streamline. And we're like, we're like, if this works here, could this work in any part of our business?
Yeah.
Well, it did.
Would you consider yourself to be a pretty organized guy by nature, by instinct, or is this just from airline, the pilot life?
I'm pretty organized. I'm pretty diligent and strict to adherence. When it comes to getting in the cockpit, so I fly a Boeing 777 now, that's what I do. When I get into the cockpit of an airplane, it is like there's no gray. It is like you are adhering to standards. And that has been ingrained in me I've been a pilot with the airlines for 27 years. So it is ingrained in me that you don't even flip a switch if you don't have a checklist in your hand. That's just the way we're taught. And that's not something that just comes to you. That's something that is ingrained in you.
Yeah.
And as we started building our business, we started running it like an airline. And then next thing you know, our business started taking off. We were able to sustain the growth. We were actually so good. And that's when we grew in 7 years to over 1,000 properties. We were in Houston, Dallas, and Fort Worth. 60% of our company was outsourced to Mexico with virtual assistants because we were so good at right person, right seat. Understanding that person's job, just like a fueler on an airplane knows how to fuel. And so all these things were very succinct that we ran our company that way. And then we got approached by a venture capital firm. And they're like, we've never seen this before. Like, we've never seen a company growing that's not on fire. It's running on its own. And 60% is not even there. And this is before virtual assistants were a big thing.
I mean, back then, especially, yeah.
And so we ended up exiting and selling. And so one of those things I've learned is we are the biggest limitation. I had this skill set, but I was like, oh, that's not relatable. Everybody has a skill set, but sometimes we put up these imaginary barriers as to why we do or don't cross things over. And, there's and if you want to hear it, it's pretty interesting. It's called the dance of when an airplane is at a gate of what actually happens. And it's pretty interesting.
I'd love to hear,
So,
what is this?
Okay. So imagine the plane I fly. It's a Boeing 777.
It's a big boy plane.
It's a big plane. Gross takeoff weight's about 775,000 pounds, and it's the length of a football field. Okay. The engines on my plane are the size of a 737 Southwest fuselage, just to put things into perspective, how big this monster is. So imagine this. It comes to the gate, which is like an apartment complex with wings because there's 350 passengers on board. You have 350 people getting off the aircraft. You have all of their bags and cargoes getting offloaded and getting dispersed either to other airplanes or to the baggage carousel so that when you arrive wherever you go, your bag is waiting for you. Then you get the cleaners. Cleaners are coming in and they're cleaning out all the trash and everything from the inside. And the catering is coming the other direction and they're restocking water, consumables, all that stuff. Maintenance is walking around the aircraft. They're checking tires, engines, structural integrity of the aircraft to make sure it can fly again. Now the fuelers hook up these fuel valve lines, these huge hoses. This thing holds 240,000 pounds of fuel. It takes an hour of high pressure fueling to fuel this thing, okay? Flight attendants are in the cabin. They're checking seatbelts, safety items, oxygen. Pilots, we're up front. We're checking routing, weather, circuit breakers, loading the flight computers, checking all the emergencies. We're going over what could happen if we lose an engine. All these things happen. In 1 hour, 350 people get back on their plane. All of their bags are miraculously corralled and loaded into the belly. And in 1 hour, this plane pushes back and not one person has to talk to anyone else to do their job. Now, this could be in Sydney, Australia, London, England, Los Angeles, Lagos, Nigeria. It doesn't matter. They call it the dance. This dance happens every minute of every second of the day. There is a dance happening, and it's all
choreographed.
It's choreographed. And so when I saw this, I'm like, if they can do this here, and this is a $250 million aircraft with 350 lives on board, why can't I do this with my staff of 9? Like it makes no sense.
Yeah.
And so that was the ideology. Now, here's the thing to think about. Everybody, you, myself, we all have a dance in our business. It may be a mosh pit, it may be a tango, but we have a dance. But here's the thing. If the fueler in your dance doesn't do his job, you're not making your destination. If the fueler, as unimportant as you may think the fueling guy is, he's the most important guy when I'm over the Pacific Ocean going to Hawaii. So, and I tell people, who's the fueler in your business that may not be doing their job? Because it could crash your business. And, listen, planes don't crash, or, 99.9% of them don't crash. Yeah. Why? It's not that these people are extraordinarily smart or gifted or talented. It's because the airlines have figured it out that you systemize your company. You don't humanize it. If the fueler calls in sick, we don't go, oh, I guess the airline shut down today. No one's going anywhere. The fueler can't make it in. He ran out of gas today at his house. The system catches the mistakes, and your business should be system-centric, not people-centric. People make it better. It's the 80-20 rule. You systemize 80%, you humanize 20%. I can look at any business, and I coach businesses and entrepreneurs. I can look at any business, and I can walk in, and I can see who they're missing on their team, and I can find their weakness before they ever tell me. Just by looking at the metrics, if they have metrics, KPIs, and I can start looking at the systems and ask them, could I sit in any position in the business and do my job with the systems manual, the KPIs, the checklists, and never have to ask you how to do this? Because the fueler doesn't ask me, hey, Steve, where does this fuel go today? Like, if I'm in Japan, they don't do it differently. It's all the same because it's systemized. Yeah.
Interesting.
And so it's an interesting. So when we did this, and now when I coach, people and stuff, we realize like we are the problem. Like, it's our limitation. The system is there. We're just not using it correctly.
So that was one of the things I was thinking about is you pointed at your head. If anyone's watching the video, you're saying we're the problem. Like, we're stuck in our own heads.
Yeah.
How do you think about process and delegation? Meaning, like, how do you overcome that thought of, well, I can't delegate this? Because I feel like that's most everyone's first thought is like, well, this is too complex for me to pass off to somebody else.
Yeah.
And,
I
and so, but you've proven it wrong because the entire dance of the airline, nobody's talking to each other,
no.
and there's 350 lives at stake.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, you know what? First of all, it's ego and pride, number one, right? And
Mm,
that is success inhibitors. Those are success killers. And the
yeah.
problem is when you build a business, in your mind, you birthed it. It's your business, it's your
Mm,
baby. Nobody can do it as good as you. The problem with that is when somebody doesn't do it exactly the way you want, we put on our superhero cape, we push them aside, and we go, you know what? I'll do it. So what you're doing is you're training your employees that they go, well, shit, he's going to do it anyways. I might as well just let him do it because I get paid either way. And what happens is you
yeah.
created that culture so that now in the future, I talk to owners who are like, man, I can't get away. My phone rings nonstop. No one can think on their own. And I'm like, well, congratulations. That's exactly the company that you built. Because
Mm,
when you build a business, it's not about you. As soon as you say it's my business, that's the ego, right? Why do I have to do this? Because it's my business and I said so. You just bought a job. And if you
mm,
can't walk away from what you do for 3 hours or 3 days, or God forbid, 3 weeks, you don't own a business, you own a job.
yeah.
And that's not why we're doing this. But we have to understand that it's bigger than us. When you own a business, I don't care if you're doing real estate, I don't care if you own one rental property, that is a business. There's income, expenses, everything to do with it. It is a business. Rules, laws, regulations, right? You know why most landlords get sued and get in trouble? Is because the one person who needs to realize it's a business doesn't. And they don't
Mm,
take time to build the business structure. And they think, here's the challenge is many people, they come in with an employee mentality because that's what we learn, right? We learn that in school.
mhm,
If we
yep.
went to the military, we're employees. That's what we know. We leave a job, we're employees. So when we leave that, whatever we're doing, we're leaving with that mindset of an employee. The only lever an employee knows how to pull is do. What do I have to do? What do I have to do? What do I have to do? It's not what you have to do, it's who you have to become. And they never pull that. I've got to become a $10 million CEO to build a $10 million business. A $50,000 employee mindset is never going to build a $10 million real estate business or any
Mm,
kind of business. It's kind of like saying, I'm going to take this Android app and I'm going to shove this into the Apple phone and it's going to work. It's
mm,
two operating systems. It's right. It's just not going to work. So the biggest
yeah.
challenge a long-winded answer, the biggest challenge why businesses fail is because the business owner thinks that they have to shoulder it, and that's motivation. And motivation dies with time. And over time, the business will beat you because as the business grows, your job as the leader is to lead, not to do. Your job is to solve problems. I get clients all the time. They're like, if I just solve this problem, I'll be good. I'm like, do you really think there's not another problem waiting for you? Like, that's what we do. Like, right? I
Yeah.
mean, every
Yeah.
day we're awake, we are solving problems. So
Yeah.
to be so naive to think if I just solve this problem, I'm good. It's like you're in the wrong business, man. You're in the employee
Mm,
mentality. You've got to embrace these problems and like, which one's next? Which one's next? We're not in the problem business, we're in the solution business. And as soon as you
yeah.
can understand that as an entrepreneur, your job is to give solutions, you'll never be successful. Or at least I'll tell you, that's my take.
Yeah. Do you run into people who flip that switch really fast from employee to employer or boss mentality? Or is it usually like a 6 to 12 month grueling process of trial by fire?
I see both. I see the people, a lot of people, I'll tell you, to be honest, the easiest people are the ones that don't have experience because it's a clean slate. The ones that
Mm,
have experience are always telling me why it won't work. I'm like,
mm,
do you want to have a conversation of how to fix it or you just want to tell me your problems? Because I consider all day, do you want me to lie to you and tell you it's okay? It's not okay. Like, like I tell people all the time. So it's them. And so if they're a clean slate and they're like, Steve, I don't know. Or when someone has hit bottom and they've completely failed and lost everything, which is very, very sad, those are the people I can fix or help easier because they're like, you know what, man, just tell me what to do. Because everyone
mm,
else is trying to prove how smart they are. They're trying to position themselves as, well, I tried this, it didn't work. I'm like, well, if you know all the answers, why aren't you there? Like,
Mm.
clearly, you know every answer. So why do you need me for? And
So in other words, it's the person who can humble themselves the
uh,
fastest.
100%, man, 100%. That's the biggest
Uh,
challenge.
so our audience, a lot of wholesalers,
Yep.
flippers, small teams, a lot of solopreneurs, but a lot of people with like 3 to 5 employees.
Yeah.
Some maybe a dozen or so. What what's the we recommend like your first hire should be an assistant. Like get a
Mhm.
personal assistant or an executive assistant to start passing things off before like an acquisitions person. What is the one or two of the processes that you see people implement? Like, this is the system, this is the process that they should have done, where they're like, man, I should have done this years ago. I wasted so much time because I didn't systematize this.
Yeah, 100. That's a great question. So a couple things. I agree with you. An assistant, virtual assistant is great. A lot of times they don't know what to do with the virtual assistant, so they just pump and
Yeah.
dump. They just pump it on them, they dump it, and then they run away, thinking that
Yeah.
magically this person's going to know how to do this. That's leading to abdication. That's not being
Mm,
a leader. But I go through the law of advancement, right? So let's talk. The law of
mm,
advancement says before you go down, you have to go up. Okay. So if you want to learn something, you've got to go down either into your time, a set time, or you go into your wallet and pay for something before your bank account can go up.
yeah.
If you want to build a house, do you build the house first and then go, man, we didn't build the foundation? Like, dude, we got to build the foundation,
Yeah.
right? No, we didn't do that. We that'd be stupid. You're like, Steve, that's dumb. But
Yeah.
my question is how many people build their business and they never stopped to build the foundation of their business? They were
Mm,
so busy hitting the ground running, they never actually went down before they go up. No matter how much money you're making, no matter how successful, if that business does not have a foundation, it's like a house. At some point, it's going to start leaning and sinking.
yeah.
Economic times, patterns change, buying habits change, tactics change, all these things change. So, going back to your question, first thing you have to do is you have to build the foundation. The fundamentals of a business, there are 5 roles that have to be filled. First one is marketing. Marketing makes the phone ring, right? You're solving a problem for someone who raises their hand and said, I'd like to talk to you. The second one is sales. Sales answers that phone and they turn that person either into a client by closing them or they determine they're not a fit for the company. Once they close them, it gets handed over to operations. Operations processes that order, fulfills the agreement, and then from there, accounting pays everyone. And the fifth one is leadership. That's the foundation of every business. I don't care if you're flipping, wholesaling, herding kittens, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Now, if I look at a business and I start looking in, I can tell you where your problems are based on which piece of the foundation isn't there.
Mm,
Yeah, we don't really
yeah.
do marketing. Okay, so you're telling me you're going out of business. You just haven't realized it yet, is what you're saying. Now,
Yeah.
what I just described is an organization chart. That's an org
Yeah.
chart. So that is the spinal cord of your company. Now,
Mm,
when you have the org chart, you may be doing all of these tasks. You may be a one-man band and you're doing everything. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. The first challenge, the first mistake, and this is, listen, this is stuff that I've learned over the years. So I'm not some guru that tells you, oh, this is what I'm telling you, these are mistakes that I made. So hopefully some people will not make the same mistakes I did.
yeah.
The biggest mistake is they don't define their destination. They
Mm,
don't define the sale date of their company. Now, let me be clear. The sale date doesn't mean you're going to sell your business. It means it is a saleable asset, which means it's running on systems, processes, and procedures, meaning not you. If you
mm,
don't define the sale date, where are you going? It's kind of like if I was going to say, hey, you should come to my house for dinner. You're going to go, okay, where do you live? And I'm going to say, I live at XYZ Main Street. You go into Google Maps, there's 2 things that you have to put into Google Maps to make this work: where you are and where you're going. And
yeah.
based on those 2 points, it will route you a strategy to get there.
Yeah.
How is that any different for your business?
Yeah.
Most people get in their car and they just start driving. And then they see me on the side of the road and they're like, hey, Steve, can you help me? And what's the first question I'm going to ask? Where are you going? And
Yeah.
you're going to go, I don't know. I'm not really sure. I'm going to go, well, then
Say,
I
I want
can't
to
really help
replace
you.
my 9 to 5. And then you
Yeah,
replace your 9 to 5 and the
I'm
goalpost moves. Yeah.
100%. So the reason
Yeah.
most people fail is they don't pick you're supposed to reverse engineer your life and your business based on the destination, and you reverse engineer it. And most
Hmm.
people don't do that. Now, the sale date, you could say it's got to be very, very specific. Aim small, hit small, right? It's got to be a day, a month, and a year. So you could say June 1st, 2028, I will be a $10 million revenue company with 35% profit margins, and I'm working 3 hours a week. That is the destination. Now we know where the plane is landing. Once we know where the plane is landing, now we go, okay, anyone that I hire, that's the vision, right? As a leader, hey guys, in 3 years, we're going to be a $10 million company, 35% margins, and I'm only going to be working 3 hours a week. If you have a problem with that, you probably shouldn't come work for me because we're not aligned in what I'm doing. This is no, like a lot of times people hide it. I'm like, why would you hide what you want? That's what you're doing. So once you know that, now, so I'm kind of sorry, I'm long-winded. I'm going
No,
back to
you're good. You're good.
I'm going back to
Yeah.
your question. Now, once you know what you want, I recommend, listen, if you want to go on a diet, you track your meals. You want to see where your money's going, you track your finances. If you want to see where your best use of your time is, do a time study. So once you do a time study and you do a 2-week time study, you will see, am I doing a low level, low enjoyment tasks, or am I doing a high income, high productivity task? Simple. You put an L or an H next to it. All those L's are what you would outsource to a virtual assistant. So yes, the virtual assistant is first, but what do you give a virtual assistant? Well, you give them what you're doing and go, this is, yes, it's got to be done, but does it need to be done by me? Now, I will tell you, when you're thinking of the business, right? Marketing, sales, operations, accounting, and leadership, if you were to figure out like, okay, well, what's the most important? And this is just my belief. Marketing and sales is the monetization of your business. That is what brings money in.
Yeah.
If you don't have money coming in, nothing else matters, in my opinion.
It's the lifeline. Yeah.
Money is the oxygen. It's the oxygen to make you breathe. Now, money solves a lot of problems short term. It won't solve long-term problems. Once you have solved the short-term problem, now you go into the next phase of systemization. Now you have to learn how to systematize your business model. And the last part is duplication. Now you've got to learn how to duplicate yourself and other people to replicate and duplicate what you're doing. Maybe you're buying multiple properties, multiple cities, multiple countries. Like I coach people that buy stuff in Australia, South America, and they're like, what's the difference of me driving to another city or just having someone else in another country? If the numbers make sense, it makes sense. So the 3 parts that you got to focus on is monetization, systemization, and duplication. Of the first 3, I would say monetization would be the first thing I focus on, because money can fix a lot of things and it can give you some breathing room to start making smarter decisions. Because when you don't have money, you get desperate. And when you're desperate, you're in chaos. And when you're in chaos, you're not in control and you make stupid decisions.
Yeah, that makes sense. Interesting. I would agree with that too. It's like your sales and marketing are the lifeline of the business, and it can be a big buffer and it can buy you some time. I think some people, they don't realize that, and they get used to the money. They're like, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. And then they get stuck as a solopreneur trying to run the business themselves. And then the money fades, maybe the market shifts or something changes, or they're not locking up as many deals. And it's like, oh crap, I didn't build a business. I didn't build systems.
Yep.
Talk to me about duplication. I don't think I've heard anyone word it like that before.
Yeah. So duplication is basically employees, right? So you can't hire employees until you have the systems in place, right? Because if not, everyone's staring around at you going, dude, what are we doing? Like what are we doing? So duplication is how you take yourself and you have a training module. You do you're able to hire, or you're able to interview, hire, train, and metric. That's part of duplication. When you get hired at a company, a big company, you have what's called indoctrination. You get indoc. It's normally 2 weeks of their training program. Military, you've got boot camp, right? That's all indoc. So even when you go to a restaurant, you see the waiter or waitress shadowing the other waiter or waitress. That's indoc. That's how they're duplicating themselves. So does your company or the company of the people, do they have a way to duplicate themselves? If Laura is on vacation in Mexico and she gets hit by a chicken bus, does the whole company stop operations? If there's no duplication, if you can't duplicate yourself, duplication is where scale happens, and
Yeah.
that is where success lies.
I'm curious, do you have any roles? Can you think of any hires or roles where uh, they're not metric based, where the results are not metric based? What I'm getting after is like with all of the hires in your businesses or people that you coach, are there hardcore like, hey, you're responsible for these metrics and these results as an employee? Is it like that for a lot of people? Because I'll talk to
Yeah,
some people where it's like their employees don't have any, there's like no accountability, no metrics, no results. And maybe they have a decent culture and things just flow. And then I'll talk to some people where it's the opposite and it can go good or bad in both scenarios. So I'm just curious your take on that.
yeah. Here's my take on it, and I come from an industry that's very heavily metric, right? Look,
Yeah.
a dashboard in your car are metrics, right? You know how much gas you have, you know how much oil temperature. Those are metrics. The dashboards in a cockpit of an airplane are metrics, right?
Yeah.
So a scoreboard on a basketball game is a metric. So they have metrics, they're just not measuring them. So when you go back to this organization chart, there are 4 things that have to go in the org chart, 4 things into every role. So let's just say marketing. You've got to first have a job description. What does this person do? Right? Like if I was going to put an ad out, what would it say? Okay. Then the next thing would be the roles and responsibilities. Well, you're responsible for pay-per-click, social media, SEO, all those things. That's what you're responsible for. I don't come in one day and I go, man, we should fire John, the marketing guy. Like, have you seen how high the grass is outside? He hasn't cut it once. It's like he doesn't even care about the grass. And John's going to go, dude, I'm the marketing guy. Like, I don't do that. It's not in my roles and responsibilities as what I do. Oh, so that's the second thing. The third thing, every role needs a key performance indicator, but they only need to have 3 to 5 per role. Next thing, the last thing, which is the most important, is the disc profile. You've got to have the disc profile. Every role has a specific disc, which is a personality profiling system.
Yeah.
And so every position is tied to a very specific disc. And so those 4 things, I don't care what people say. If they do, it's one of those things are good until they're not. Right. And when I go and start coaching people and I do like, 2-day events and stuff, one of the first things I tell them to do is, let me see that. I want all of your employees to take a disc profile and I want to see what their disc is. And based on their disc, I could tell you if they're having problems in that role without knowing anything else. I can go, this person's not the right person. And this is why. And they're like, wow, it's not magic.
The predict is that they're probably struggling with XYZ because they were built for XYZ. They're wired for this.
Exactly. 100%. And it's one of those things that people just don't realize. There's a science to it. It's not mad. You don't go off of your gut feeling. You don't say, I feel like I have enough gas. You're like, I know I have gas based on the gauge, right? It's just, and so, and even to going down this rabbit hole, the ads that you run should be worded per the disc profile that's going to be reading it. So that's why people have such a hard time hiring the wrong people, because they make the ad for the wrong person. So I'm like, well, no wonder you're having a hard time. It's not the right disc. If I was a certain disc profile, I wouldn't want this job.
Yeah.
So that's another conversation, but that's another thing that people mess up on, is they don't understand that it's like when you put a tenant in your property, you screen the tenant, you do the background, lay down the rules, lay down the laws. All this happens for a tenant. Don't you think you should do that for your employees? Like, these are the ones that actually are going to make or break your company. And we're like, I got a good gut feeling. He answered the phone. That's your screening? Like, that's how you screen them?
It's painfully real, because especially for our audience, I mean, it's just spot on, man.
Yeah, exactly.
All this work to screen a tenant and to be so careful and diligent about who you would put in the rental. But employees, it's like, oh, come on, we'll learn along the way. Let's just do it.
I got a good gut feeling. And listen, I get it, man. I've been there. I mean, all the things I'm saying, I have personally screwed up multiple times. So I'm not immune to it, and I'm not immune in the future. But how we get better is repetition. And so,
Yeah.
the way that we get better is listening to this show, listening to people and going, okay, I keep hearing this same thing over and over again. What if these guys are right? Maybe I shouldn't go down this path. And that's the
Yeah.
beauty of these podcast shows. That, they're getting an education from. I've got the scars, I've got the arrows in my back. You do too. We all do. So why not just listen? Like that's my thing. Is like I get no enjoyment telling people they're messing up, but would you rather me say nothing and pat you on the back and say, "Oh, good job"?
Mm.
Like that's not
Yeah.
me.
Right. Interesting. I have kind of a side note based on that. Would you consider yourself to be like, are you naturally candid with people? Are you a pretty straight shooter? Or is that something you had to learn to be?
I'm a pretty straight shooter. I've always been this way. And listen, I'm coached. I have a coach, and one day my coach asked my team. They said, "How would you describe Steve?" And they said, "Honest, consistent, and sincere." So
Hmm.
my point is like my thing is like, listen, you may not like what I have to say, but I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it to help you. And I'm not
Yeah.
doing it to pat you on the back. I can be nice or I can be honest. I can't be both sometimes. And
Hmm.
I've always learned I would much rather someone be honest with me and tell me than just lie to me and just push me down the road. So I just tell people all the time, like, look, you don't have to like me, but you have to respect me because I'm doing this to help you. I'm not doing this to help myself.
Yeah. Yeah. When you love someone, you got to deliver hard news, especially when you're all going after the same thing. You love the mission, you're invested in the mission. Like you said, if you have a vision, if you know where your business is going, you got to be real with people. Would you
100%,
say
man.
that would you say that some of the leaders who are really struggling, do you see it's a common trait that they're not straight shooters or they have a hard time being honest with people?
Yeah,
Do you
I
run
think
across that or
I,
no?
I do. I think a lot of people want to be liked. They
Mm,
they they want to please everyone and they want to be liked. And they think that their success if people like them. And listen, I don't think they do it other than the fact that they don't want to rock the boat. They want
mm,
they want things stable. And I think that is, leadership is something that's learned. You're not born a good leader. I mean, I think when we're born, we can sleep, we can eat, and we can poop. Other than that, there's nothing else that we are good at, right? I had to learn to become a pilot. You had to learn to do what you do. You've got to learn to be a leader. And so people just take their leadership skills based on maybe their parents or maybe military or whatever. And they either are just like that or they're nothing like that or they've taken pieces of it. But that doesn't make you a good leader if you don't practice it. And
mm.
so I think that being a good leader is something that's learned. I don't think you're born with it. I think you're bred.
Mm. I like that. I can appreciate that, man. Well, shoot, we're getting towards time. You had talked about vision, and you sold your company to VC, which that
Yeah.
was a cool story. So thanks for sharing that.
Mhm.
You sold the company. You could have just chilled, and you have your job as a commercial airline pilot, which I think is so cool. By the way, like having that
Thank-
vision of a kid, be like, this is the one thing I want to do, and you did it. I think
Yeah.
that's freaking awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah. What's your why now? Like, why are we on this podcast? Why are you still coaching entrepreneurs? Why do you keep going when you don't have to?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that, things happen in life, some good, some bad. And we have things that shape who we are. I've had a lot of very, very positive things in my life. I've met some amazing people. I've done things that I only would read about as a little kid. But I've also had the dark side. I've had loss. And as we were talking earlier, my son passed away last year on a motorcycle accident. He was 19 years old. And of course, it's a very, very, very tragic thing that personally I deal with every day. And you know, when he passed away, I remember at his service, there were pictures, thousands and thousands of pictures of us in the family. The kid went to 20 countries. He bought his first rental property at 14 years old. The kid, he was a drummer in a Metallica band. The kid lived an amazing life at 19.
Mm,
Unfortunately, that's where it stopped. And the reason I bring this up is as entrepreneurs, sometimes we get so busy being busy that we forget that we're doing it for our loved ones. And I can tell you that some entrepreneurs, many of us, without knowing it, can be very, very selfish. And we always say we're doing it for our family, we're doing it for our loved ones, but we never actually take the time for them. And when my son passed away, I thought to myself, if this was fate and this was going to happen, I'm glad I can sit here and say, I'm glad I was able to, instead of being the guy that for the rest of my life said, I wish I would have.
Mm.
And the memories, he and I, we rode motorcycles together. I loved it. We would do stuff. We go rappelling in Utah. We did some cool shit. And those were all free. They don't cost you anything. And so we lie to ourselves saying one day, when it could be taking them to the park, it could be just driving and talking to them. He and I would go to the gym all the time. All those things are free. And, look, and I hope it never happens to anyone, but if you ever get a knock on the door at 10:30 at night, like my wife and I did, those memories cease to exist. They're done. And the reason I do this now is twofold. Number one, I don't want people to say one day, number one. And number two, I want people to understand that there's more to life than just making money. There's more to life than just doing this. My wife and I created a foundation. My son was a welder. And so welding does not get financial aid, trade school, automotive, welding, electrical. Yeah. So we started a nonprofit for high school kids that cannot afford trade school. They can't afford it. It's just not in their life, their parents, whatever the case may be. So my wife and I put kids through trade school by people donating to my son's foundation. 100% of the money goes to them. And again, it's our way of giving back. It's our way of trying to create more memories for more people, because our memories are done with our son. So we could either sulk and cry every day and it not be worth anything, or we can make a statement and say, we're going to keep it going because of him. And so so to answer your question, that's why I do this. I try to help the kids, and I try to help the entrepreneurs realize that there's more to life than just being busy working and making money.
Man, I appreciate you being transparent and vulnerable. I think it's going to help a lot of people. I didn't realize it was last year. So I'm very sorry to hear that, man. But I think it's really cool what you're doing. And I can't agree with it more. Like if you haven't had a knock on the door, if you haven't gone through something tragic, if you haven't had something like that, if you haven't had a wake up call, it's hard to replicate that urgency.
It is.
And I think I don't know. I've had wake up calls before, and I'm thankful for, I'm not thankful for the wake up calls, but I'm thankful for what they've done. And if you haven't had one, I'm like, find people with those stories and talk to them and get a sense for some sort of urgency in your life. Because without it, you're going to get comfortable. You're going to get stagnant, and you're not pushed to go create a vision like you've done, like you're telling people to do. So.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And again, it's something I think is important. I think it grounds us, right? Because we're all, look, at the end of the day, we're all human. We could be the best prolific person and this and that. You get that knock and it's over. And so my thing is to try to help people realize that. That's all.
That's really cool, man. What's the website people can go to for the foundation?
So the website is livelikejet.com. So it's JETT. So that was his name, Jet. So it's livelikejet.com.
Awesome. Check that out, everyone. Where can people go to get in touch with you? Yeah. If they want to be coached by you?
Yeah, they can go to my website. It's Steve Rozenberg, Rozenberg, steverozenberg.com. I do educational events in Houston, Texas. I do 2-day events that are pretty mind-blowing. It will change you when you walk into the day that you walk out. And I give it all, man. It's me for 2 days, and we rebuild who you are as a real estate investor, as a business owner. And I leave it all on the floor when I'm done. It's 2 days. It's educational. It's interactive. It's a workshop. If you go to my website, you can see it, but it's pretty amazing.
That's awesome. When's the next one coming up? This podcast will be, we're recording in May. This podcast will be coming out mid-June, I think, end of June. When's the next one? Yeah. So I've got one June 17th and 18th, and then the next one is July 7th and 8th. Awesome. That's cool,
Yeah.
man. Well, thanks for sharing it. Any parting words? Anything you want to leave the audience with, man? I think you drove it home, dude.
I, I think just look, man, remember, hug your kids, kiss your spouse, take a breath, smile. The sun's coming up tomorrow. Look, remember what you're doing this for and really like step back and just kind of, we all get caught up in the weeds. Sometimes just step back and just take a deep breath and really remember like, man, I get to do this. It's not that I have to do this. I get to do this. And I think we forget that sometimes. So if I had to say that, man, just remember that parting words.
Awesome. Appreciate it, man. Well, thanks again for hopping on the podcast. Thanks for sharing. I think I've gotten a lot of value out of this, and I definitely scratched the curiosity itch that I had with getting to hear your story. It's been fun. It's been real. So thanks for hopping on, man.
Thank you. Appreciate it, brother.
All right. We'll see you guys later. We'll see you in a couple weeks.